So for those of you who are new, really welcome. Just a quick intro. So what's Branded Change? We bring people together around this idea that we need to better sell the great ideas, products, and services for change that we see in the world. It started as a book where we published the tools and the method and the case studies that we use in our trainings here at the Brandling, and it's since run into a community with events online and offline, and we've had this amazing group of brand professionals and change makers come together to share their skills and experiences and lift each other up. So it's been amazing to see that happen. The goals for these monthly community hangouts are really to build our skills, get ideas for your own brand, and meet potential collaborators. So never feel shy to shamelessly ask a question for your own benefit, to shamelessly self-promote. That's what we're all here for. And I wanted to give you an update on the Oatly case study. We did a brand jam on Oatly last month, and it was really a cool session, I thought, and thanks for everyone who also gave us the feedback in the forum so that we're able to make those sessions better. Wanjiru, my colleague, spent another, I think, 40, 50, 60 hours crafting the case study, and we're 95% ready. We're just waiting on our proofreader, Johanna, to get the file back to us. So everyone who attended that session will get the case study in their mailbox. We have some other events coming up. We have a monthly personal branding mastermind group that you might like to join. Bas, who's here in this hangout, is one of the hosts there. We have Branded Change Academy starting in April, where I work with people, a group of about 16 people, to build their brand, which is really exciting. We have a brand thinking canvas facilitation course, and the lovely ladies of the Lisbon meetup are helping a local change maker strengthen its brand again at the end of the month. My name is Anne Miltenburg. If you don't know me yet, I'm the founder of the Brandling and I'm the author of Branded Change. And I also brought my colleague Wanjiru Gathanga. Wanjiru, give them a wave. Wanjiru is our research fellow here, and I'm really excited to have her on board as well, because she actually represents some of the more, let's say, the marketing brain and the technical brain of our duo. And together we're hosting Sarah Bacom. Sarah is a project manager and growth for good trainer at Growth Tribe Amsterdam. And I've been following the work of Growth Tribe for a couple of years, and it's really exciting to see how they've grown and how important really the skills are that they teach. So the way that I think about growth marketing is, first you need to build a really strong brand strategy to understand what you stand for, what's your story, who's your audience, how you position yourself. And then the growth marketing basically helps you to really put all of that work that you've done into good use by coming up with great ways to actually grow your audience and convert people to sales. So I'm excited to talk to Sarah about that. We'll do 20 minutes of conversation, Sarah and I, then we'll discuss some of the questions that were pre-submitted. I'll check with everyone to see if those people that shared their questions, if they're on the call, and then we'll just do an open Q&A. Sounds good? Okay, cool. Hey, Sarah, welcome.
Hi, Anne. Thanks so much. Hi, everybody. It's great to meet some of you and see you all. And thanks so much for having me to have a chat with you guys today. I'm really excited to hear some of your questions and anything else that pops up as well that you didn't already have a chance to submit to Anne.
Yeah, great. So one of the things that I guess so Sarah's been a guest about a year ago, and at that moment we discussed a bit of the basics. But I'm curious if that has evolved. So how would you describe growth marketing to people today?
That's a really good question. I was actually thinking about this question earlier today. What has changed in the past year? And growth marketing, I would say that, if I would describe it now, would be a very prominent mindset that focuses on rapid experimentation and actually running, instead of what we would call campaigns traditionally in marketing, you focus more on this idea of experimentation. So thinking critically about what is it that you want to change, what is important to your business at the moment, and how can you run experiments, marketing related experiments, to help fix things So with growth marketing, I think I got caught up just a little bit beforehand that the experimentation process is the most important thing, and your mindset is about focusing on this experimentation process. You really want to be keen to figure out what is the most important thing to your business when it comes to the marketing side of things, and how can you test out different ideas. So maybe you are working on building your website for the first time, and you want to see what is going to be the best headline to capture the ethos of your branding. So you can use different platforms and different tooling, focus groups, a whole host of methodologies to enable you to see what's going to be the most effective headline for your business. It's really going to capture your audience and help them go to the next goal of whatever the website is, whether it's to purchase something, sign up to get involved, whatever it might be. And you're always working within this process of experimentation, aided by mindset. You want to find out how can you make the most of what you have using your resources, and also find out what your data is going to be telling you and make some insights based upon that as well. I've got lots of examples to talk you guys through as well to really illustrate that.
Yeah, I think that would be really exciting because, well, obviously it's not your, like, let's say your grandmother's marketing mindset where it was much more about static media, where you never know what was going to happen, and you were working towards something, you weren't able to test it usually beforehand. It went out into the world, you had no idea what the immediate reactions were, and so this sounds like a super useful, obviously very timely approach. Could you, it'd be great if you can make it concrete. So what is one of the projects that you guys have been working on at Growth Tribe that is relatable to, let's say, the people at that form the brand change community?
Yeah, absolutely. I can actually share my screen with you all if you want to see what it looked like in action to help contextualize a little bit more. So let me just go ahead and share my screen. You can see along with me, and I can talk you through a process or a project that I had the opportunity to work on about a year ago. So I had the opportunity to work with Amnesty International Netherlands about a year ago as the senior coach for one of their projects. And they were concerned with essentially their biggest campaign of the year called their Rights for Rights campaign. It's where essentially they try to encourage people to write letters every year to political leaders or political prisoners to give them signs of hope, to ask for people to be released from prison or inhumane conditions, and a variety of other similar related topics. And so with this project, we focused on how can we increase the number of letters that are submitted through the website of Amnesty International Netherlands for the Rights for Rights campaign. And this project really was brand new for Amnesty because everyone who was involved came from a different department. And so we had people that had a little bit of information, but that information wasn't connected. So we had to work with the team to get everybody on the same page, but also instill this process of rapid experimentation. And this process, we use a process called Growth. And it's essentially a framework that enables you to gather ideas, rank your ideas, outline your experiments. You go through this work phase and you study your data. We got them working through this process. And for the campaign, we primarily focused on actually how can you do landing page optimization or website optimization. So an example of, so I have to switch back and forth between slides for this, but an example of what it actually looked like beforehand, we did some things that are called 5-second tests, really easy tests that you can do to see how is a page going to be received. Can people actually understand the value proposition of a page, or understand what the page is actually trying to advertise, to sell, to communicate, whatever the purpose of it is? And so with Amnesty, we went through a whole process of doing this for each of the different sections of the website. So testing things like the Rights for Rights here, testing whether people understood what the campaign was for, why was it really important to get involved in this. This whole process took about a couple of months because we had to get everybody working on the same team, going up with lots of ideas, trying different things to see what copywriting is going to be the best, what's going to bring the most attention, what's going to make the most sense, and also changing things around like the call to action. Can you make this button a little bit clear, or should this be a different color? All these little things you can try out. So lots of brainstorming sessions were involved in this. And then we'd be able to plan different experiments based around some of our maybe ideas around what we thought would work best. Sometimes we were really wrong. Sometimes we were very right when it came to our experiment ideas. That's why it's always so important to test, because you never quite know when you're going to be really lucky or when you're not going to be right. You always have to test things to see if they're going to work. And as a result of the campaign, working through the growth process, we were able to actually help them achieve a 330% uplift in their number of letters submitted through the website. So whereas in 2018, they had 60,000, roughly 60,000 letters submitted to the website for the Rights for Rights campaign. And at the end of the year, at the end of their campaign, when we worked with them, it was over 200,000 letters that were submitted. We also had an increase in the email and an increase in the phone numbers that were also submitted as a part of the campaign. Those were two of the secondary metrics they really wanted to work to improve for their later fundraising campaigns.
So one of the things that I find really interesting about this case is the first thing is that you're highlighting is that it takes a team. Can you speak a little bit more about that? Because we tend to, I think a lot of people who are also on this call tend to not be inside a company, or if they are inside of the company, they don't necessarily work on the brand or marketing side across silos. So how does it work? Like, how do you anchor this kind of growth mindset into an organization?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And if you are a freelancer, you're a consultant, or you're not directly attached to a department and you want to get involved in a project, there's always almost always a little bit of awkwardness initially, like you're lacking some information or you're lacking perspective or focus. So one of the things that we always recommend is that you start off by getting everyone on the same call, maybe in the same room if you can be at this point, but getting everybody together and discuss, make sure that you're really clear on what is it that you're actually trying to do. We'd be so surprised the number of times we have brainstorming sessions, and at the end of it, we talk to people like, what is your goal for the project, or what's the best thing you think about this project? And everybody is on a completely different page sometimes. So it's really important that you start off and everybody is aligned on what the actual common goal of the project is. Who is going to be responsible for what? Where's everybody coming from? Especially if you're not in the same department or you don't necessarily work with people on a daily basis that you're now involved in a project on. Really important to know what everybody's skill sets and what they can best contribute to the project, and also potentially where they want to develop as well. For this project, a lot of people they're all highly skilled individuals within their own areas, but they also wanted to learn a lot from each other, and some of them were far more technical than others. So there was a lot of leveling up that occurred and a lot of mentoring happened within the team. And once you get this kind of common ground, whether it can be in a first meeting or a series of meetings where you're getting common ground on what is that you actually want to achieve, what can everyone bring to the table, what are you hoping to get out of it, so aligning on all your common goals. Think about what is going to be your plan of attack. Are you going to have what we would call sprints or stand-up meetings? So you work in sprints, or kind of a time box period of 2 weeks, working on a set of experiments that you want to run, and you think about how are you going to keep touch during that time period as well. There's daily stand-ups where you have like a 15-minute phone call. Everybody just says how they're contributing towards the product or projects for the particular day. You can have retrospectives, a whole host of other different what we call Agile or Scrum techniques to keep in touch with each other. So with any sort of project like this, it's all about making sure that initially you take care of your alignment, and then you work to see how you can keep up with each other and keep touch throughout that project, however long that it's going to be running for. Make sure you don't lose touch and you don't lose sight of being able to distinguish the woods from the trees. You can actually keep track of what you're working on and why you're working on this.
So it sounds like it's an entirely different timeline as well in terms of process. So it's not that you're working with a set of, a group of creatives, let's say a copywriter, a designer, the web developer, and a photographer, and you finish it and you put it online and you see results come in, but the timeline is very different. You're openly experimenting.
Yes.
What would you do? You notice that that shift in sort of in the way that the process is run? Is that easy for people to pick up?
I would love to say yes, but it really varies so widely. It depends on what kind of background, but also what kind of mindset that people bring into it. I generally say that no matter if you're coming from a very traditional background or a very modern digital marketing background, anybody can pick up the process and get the hang of it. It may take a little bit of extra time, but anybody can get the hang of it as long as you have the mindset, you have the desire to want to introduce a little bit more structure into how you're actually going about your projects, but also the desire to experiment and get that data you need to make better informed decisions. A lot of people, their initial excitement and where there's that pitfall and ends up messing up the process is that they get really excited. They have all these wonderful ideas, especially with all the creatives, all these ideas, but you don't take the time to properly study your experiments, or you're lacking the technical ability or the guidance on how to actually analyze, how to work Google Analytics, or how to conduct user feedback groups, anything along those sorts. So that's one of the major pitfalls. And if people don't have the mindset, or they skip over that important part of the process, even if they have the mindset, that can really delay them from getting into the growth process or the rapid experimentation process.
It sounds like it's a big leap for many of us who kind of, rely on intuition to make the leap to a really rational approach. But I imagine as soon as you see your numbers going up, that you're quickly bought into the process. I'm seeing a couple of questions come in. I do want to address them, but I also want to make sure we get to some of the pre-submitted questions. But just quickly, because you showed that the slide with the landing page, what was the particular tool that you used for testing that? Because I know that growth hackers always have like an entire folder of like a entire stack of tools. So I'd love to.
Yes. Absolutely. So there's lots of different platforms I can give you tips and tooling on, especially if you think of something after this session. And this particular tool we use for the 5-second test is one of my favorite platforms. I use it myself on both sides, both as a tester and a testee, and it's called Usability Hub. So if you just Google or use Ecosia, whatever search engine you're using, and you Google Usability Hub, you should be able to find it as one of the first links.
What could be interesting, I think, also as the case was Mr. Green, which had to do with a challenge about how do we get people to adopt electric cars quicker. And yes. I see that Giselle has a question about more in depth about landing page optimization, but I think Mr. Green kind of speaks to that point as well. So maybe that's a good way to address that question.
Yeah, absolutely. So with landing page optimization, that's one of the easiest areas. You can have some what we would call wins or some successes when it comes to experimentation. And the example that Anne is referring to is from an electric car leasing company based here in Amsterdam. And a couple of years ago, we had a junior sales rep, Max, attend the course representing Mr. Green. And Max was really concerned with one particular thing, and that was how he could speed up his sales cycle. So with leasing electric cars, his sales cycle was typically anywhere from 3 to 6 months. And Max was really frustrated by that process because it was taking him 3 to 6 months to be able to actually get his commission at the end. That's a lot of client nurturing, a lot of areas that people can drop off at. And so what he decided, he was going to optimize the website with Mr. Green. And he started by doing some initial testing. And the very first thing he looked at was the homepage. The homepage had in the background this electric car. It had 3 brightly colored call to actions, or like 3 big boxes on the page. You could click them. And if you landed on the page and did a 5-second test, usually you would have no idea what the value proposition of this page was, what it actually looked like. And so Max was immediately cued into that we need to redo the homepage. It's not clear for people where even to click to find out more information. If you did find out, or if you did have a guess that, yeah, maybe you should click one of these calls to action and you'd be taken to a page to find out more information, you would then be hit with this really long box of text. And the small button, which the color of the button had even changed, and it didn't look like a button at all, actually, it was a little hidden in the top right-hand corner. You were supposed to click that to find the contact form. And if you somehow found the contact form, you would then send the information to a junior sales rep. It would go into their inbox, and it could take a couple of days or maybe a few hours. It wasn't standardized on how long it was actually going to take to actually hear back about information on leasing an electric car. This whole process, we're doing some user testing, some 5-second testing, was not conducive. It was causing a lot of people to drop off, get confused on the website, and it wasn't a positive first experience, especially when learning about Mr. Green, seeing what the brand had to offer and company's principles. So Max took a couple of experiments during the course, or tried a couple of experiments during the course, and actually took him until a 6th experiment to find something that worked beautifully for him. And that's a really good thing to remember if you're already thinking about experimentation or you have some experience in it. failure is an inherent part of the process. And that's why the mindset is so important, because every time you're failing, you're gaining knowledge that you didn't previously have to make better educated decisions about your experimentation, about your marketing choices. And as I said, Max until his 6th time to find something that worked well. So he had a lot of data about what did not work so well, and it was helping him make better choices around what to do next. And he decided as an experiment that he was going to create a landing page that would have a very small contact form and have a very clear headline as well, communicating that they were leasing electric vehicles. And the background of the page even had like a photo of Max you could see shaking a customer's hand and leasing a car. But it was very simple. It only took him a couple hours to put the page together, and that was after going through some usability testing as well. So very scrappy, put together just to test it. And he set up some Facebook ads that had a new targeted audience he wanted to test out that would drive traffic to the landing page he put together. On the landing page, he also had the contact form. It was set up an automated process. So as soon as people submitted the contact form, then they would receive an automated email from Max that had a link to what was essentially a virtual showroom where they could go through and put in all the details about the electric car they wanted to lease. Now, that saves a lot of time from taking anywhere from a few days or a few hours to hear back to all of a sudden you're putting the user in control and then getting the information that you would ultimately need from them within a few minutes if they choose to go through the kind of the virtual showroom process. Setting up the landing page, the Facebook ads, setting up the virtual showroom using a program called Typeform, it's a virtual survey or it's a survey platform. That all took him about 2 days, and he also had a particular cost for that as well. So Max got 2 days, set up this experiment, and within the very first day he actually launched everything. He received 1 hard conversion, or he actually was able to go through the process of leasing a Tesla to 1 person. That was a big indicator for Max that yes, this process compared to especially to 3 to 6 months was going to work well, but he didn't stop there, right? You never stop with just 1 sale. That typically would not be a good metric indication. So you always want to continue over the next couple of weeks or 1 week period, however long you decide to take on that, to see whether you're going to get more and more interest. And Max continued to have more and more sales after running this experiment for 2 weeks. So he was able to take all of this data to his boss, show him what he had actually done, because he did a rather sneaky thing, which I would absolutely not advise anyone to do. It's a personal decision, but he didn't tell his boss about any of this because he didn't want to complain to his boss. He didn't like their sales cycle taking 3 to 6 months. So he was able to take all of this data to his boss to show him this might be a better way of us doing things. And it led to an 800% increase for them as a business, because his boss was absolutely thrilled with the amount of success that Max had had by just taking some initiative, redesigning the page and showing a little bit of digital savvy as well by using some new tooling that enabled them to really speed things up as a business. Max was promoted to head of growth. I always get asked if he was fired. He was not fired. He became the head of growth at Mr. Green, and now he's the head of growth at one of the Netherlands' fastest growing companies, actually.
Well done.
Simple landing page optimizations can get you places. Yeah.
Yeah, for yourself, your boss, your career. Well,
yeah,
I think what this example really speaks to is that one of the things that I feel, I guess it's one of my tropes that we repeat a lot during our courses is like, I never like the fingers crossed brand strategy. So having an amazing idea or product and service and kind of thinking like, okay, we'll build it, we'll launch it, people will love it, and they'll tell each other about it, and we'll see what happens. And so I think that this process really addresses some of those issues as well. The other thing that I find interesting is that I basically translate to my world is that you're not fighting reality. So I think what I hear you say is that you're accepting that people will drop off at so many points, and how can you, instead of accepting that, how can you design the process in such a way that you can actually keep those people on board and get to sales faster? We have a couple of, I'm not sure, Giselle, by the way, if this example from Mr. Green indeed like kind of spoke to that. Okay, cool. Yeah, because we have a couple of questions from people who, I'm not sure if everyone is on this call, but I wanted to bring them up anyway. But Giselle, you are writing a book, and you wrote a book and you self-published in Brazil last year, and you had a question about how can you actually reach a wider audience? So Giselle has managed to, be the foot in the door with her friends and family, and get the book into as many hands as she can within her own circle, but thinks that is a bit of a sign that she does need a good strategy to actually reach beyond. And I thought that might be an interesting question to kick off with. Giselle, did I represent your question correctly? Okay, good. So other aspiring self-publishers, pay attention.
It's congratulations, first of all, on writing a book. That's a major achievement within itself. So now it's time for your next hurdle in finding your wider audience. There are lots of different avenues that you, oh my gosh, I love the cover too. There are so many different avenues that you can explore here. And if you do have, for everybody, if you have any follow-up questions, I'll give you guys my LinkedIn address or my LinkedIn link. And so you can always just send me a message afterwards as well. I'm happy to answer any questions. But for the initial question, actually reaching a wider audience, I would do a little bit of upskilling. I'm not sure about your background, of course, but there are some resources, like books called the Mom Test, that I would look into. The Mom Test, for example, is a book that enables you to go through and see how to ask better questions, how to actually find your audience, and how to speak to your potential audience as well. So that it's called the Mom Test because it's making fun of the natural tendency that we all have to do, or we all have, that when we have a brilliant idea, we want to immediately ask our family and friends, what do you actually think of this idea? And most of the time, unless you're actually very fortunate in some cases, I'm going to tell you that's a wonderful idea. You should definitely explore that. I'm sure somebody out there is going to love it. Something along those lines are going to give you really positive feedback, but not necessarily the critical feedback that you need, because what you're trying to figure out is for what audience are you solving a potential problem or making something a little bit better for. So books like the Mom Test go through and give you a lot of, well, this one's particularly entertaining, examples of how to best ask questions and start finding different audiences. The next step afterwards, after you do a little bit of upskilling or a little bit of background research, is think critically about what particular problem are you attempting to solve, or what conversation are you trying to add into, and what kind of audiences would that most appeal to. So you put together what you think is your own persona canvas or job to be done canvas, but what problem, what conversation are you adding to, what are you making better, and who would be, in your opinion, the audience for that. And you can go through a process of starting to validate this. So you can, for instance, if you want to run Facebook ads, you can look to your persona canvas, you can set demographic information, you can set needs or interest based, and you can start testing to see whether or not you're having success with that particular audience group. You can also do focus groups, you can find different spaces of communities online to get feedback, for example, as well. And then you could also, if you wanted some further mentorship in this area, growthmentor.com is also a really nice resource to check out. They have all different backgrounds for mentors and giving you some specific advice on finding community as well. It's a really good future one. Keep in mind for any sort of growth related business.
It's an interesting world, the self-publishing world. Actually, the reason, so we initially, Brand the Change was initially crowdfunded and self-published. And I thought that the effort to market it myself was so extremely tiring that I was very happy to get a traditional publishing deal. But then interestingly enough, traditional publishers don't have that growth mentality. So for instance, you have no data on where your book is being sold. So there's different routes to getting things out there. By the way, Giselle, I also tagged Guillermo in a post. He's self-publishing a book on packaging, sustainable packaging at the moment, and he might be someone interesting to talk to as well. Then I had another question. I think there's a lot of people who, in general, are interested, like how can we get more engagement with people? How can we get more people to sign up? And I imagine that's a bit of a tough question to answer, but I still figured I'd put in front of you to see if we can get you to put your brain to work on an open question.
Okay, right. So there's lots of different again, fun topics that you guys have. It's brilliant. So one of the very first things is to give yourself a little bit of a sanity check. I really like that Anne brought up earlier, that you are dealing with reality here. So we do call it a sales funnel, a pirate funnel, that it is a marketing funnel. You do lose people as you go down, right? So you're not going to capture everyone. If you have 100 people visit your page, if you have every 100 people, every 100 person who visits the page actually sign up, please give me a shout, give me a call. I want to hear what your magic formula is for that. But you are going to lose people. So one of the best things you can do is test your headlines, just like we've been talking about with these 5-second tests, testing to make sure that your value proposition is easily communicated to people, actually understand what your value proposition is. So if you are testing a group of 10 people, and research shows you only need to test about 10 people to really get all the information that you need, if it's clear or not, testing 10 people, you should have at least 6 out of those 10 people understand what your value proposition is. If you're getting 8 out of 10 people, that's really good, especially if you have a more complex product. And then also you want to test, is it clear what your unique selling point is, or what your unique benefit is? What are you bringing that's unique to the table that no one else really has, or that you're doing better than another organization? Now, this is a lot to pack into just a quick 5-second test, right? So if you just get 2 out of 10 people identifying that this is what your unique proposition is, or unique selling point is, you're doing very well. If you can get 4 out of 10, that's the gold standard. But again, that's not always achievable, especially if you have a more complex value proposition. Okay. So you can give yourself a little bit of wiggle room there. But testing that using platforms like Usability Hub, you can use usertest.com. There's so many different ones out there. There's also an AI-based algorithm as well. It's called Visual Eyes. They have an extension plugin for Chrome. That's also a really nice one to use. And they're trying to replace 5-second tests where you just take a screenshot of your landing page, upload it, and it will tell you what they think the accuracy or the understanding rate is going to be. They also show you cool things like heat maps too. So there's lots of different tooling that you can use that's out there to understand, is your value proposition clear? Is your unique selling point clear to your audience? You can do further experimentation with things like color schemes, how you place images, how you structure information on your landing page or your homepage, whatever is the first point that customers see. So do you have a little bit of social proof there? It's really important to consider, so people feel a little bit safer with purchasing, subscribing, joining an organization, downloading a newsletter, just adding, what organization are you part of? If it's something like Brand the Change community, that's very well known. So can you add something similar to that? Whether you've been featured in a newspaper, you've been developed in partnership with someone, anything like that to help give you a little bit more validity, especially if you're starting off, is very good. And then if you're still not getting a lot of traction, then it could be that you are targeting the wrong audience. So then it's time to go back to the basics. Examine any assumptions that you've made. The persona canvas, I saw that Anne said there's one in the book that you can use, you can take a look at. So thinking about, are you making some assumptions on your persona? Are you targeting the wrong audience? And how are you even trying to connect with the audience? Are they coming from Facebook, Instagram, meetups, word of mouth, trying to understand more about your audience, testing any assumptions, and also testing out different platforms to reach your audience on as well. So if you're struggling with, you get people to the page, but they're not converting, and you've done lots of optimizations on the landing page, check your assumptions and check your understandings of your audience as well, or who you think that your audience is. Because often we have our ideal audience and then we have our actual audience. And the trick is to make sure that they line up as much as possible, right?
One of the assumptions that I often see people make is that when they're thinking about testing, they're thinking about hundreds and hundreds of people. Yep. And also, if you're in an early stage where you're still kind of building your product and service idea, you might be very shy, because you also it's one of those situations where you don't want to hear that it's not working, so you have to overcome that shyness. I think the idea of actually just being able to reach out to 10 people is quite helpful from like a confidence point of view. And absolutely, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Usability Hub also gives you the option to find your testers there, right? So you don't have to go out and flyer the park in order to find 10 people, but you can also find them there according to demographics, I think.
Yes, absolutely. It's a really good point. So with Usability Hub, you can create a test and have a link to test with your own audience or members of a group like this. So if somebody else is self-publishing, you can ask other self-publishers to give you some feedback, but also you can use their own testers. So I myself am a usability tester. I get emails every few days if I meet the demographic requirements of someone who is looking for feedback on a test that they put together. So it's age, it can be gender, nationality, native language, technological skill as well, university education, what level of education, even very specific things like income and job background as well, you can also test for. You can leave things very open, which is what we generally recommend you do to start off with, but you can also narrow it down to really speak or get an idea of your audience specifically.
I think also the process of becoming a tester actually helps you to understand how to test. That's also what I love about the mom test book, is that if you don't have a lot of experience in testing, it's just very helpful to see other people do it, because you just kind of pick up the skill by osmosis. The question that Leslie asked, which I thought in the chat was quite interesting, about the timeline, like how long does a growth sprint take? And also when you take all of this testing in consideration, is that a week, a couple of weeks, months? How would you answer that question?
Absolutely. So I would say if you are working in standard Agile or Scrum or mixture where you're picking and mixing, then generally you are working in 2-week sprints. So for 2-week periods, you would start off by doing some planning, thinking about what information do you have, what experiments do you want to run, and you spend a good portion of those 2 weeks running your experiment, and at the end of it, concluding what did the data actually tell you and what are going to be your next steps for that experimentation process. Now, that also it's good to note that that's for fast-moving organizations. So startups and scale-ups, that format usually works pretty well. But for a lot of our corporate clients, or even the companies, the larger corporations we work with that are very innovative, it still takes a long time to get that kind of stuff done, because you have to go through procurement, you have to check with legal sometimes, so it can take up to 4 weeks for them. Now, that's a really big range, 2 weeks to 4 weeks. So you have to think about what works well for your organization. And if something like a 2-week period doesn't work well for you, figure out what does and adapt your process over time as well. Sometimes 2 weeks is way too soon for you to get started. So test it out, see what works, and make some modifications along the way until you find a good balance of works well for you. We don't recommend you do anything shorter than 2 weeks, because simply you don't have enough time to properly run things typically. So 2 weeks is the minimum, and it's the ideal at the same time. But again, test things out and see how it works for you, and then you can adapt to try to make those timelines a little bit shorter where possible if it's taking a little bit longer.
So the testing and the process and the work phase, some of that I think is very much focused on, like, okay, we're going to see when people come in, how do they respond? And Marika actually had a question that I thought was interesting, because it's about kind of the other half of the process, which is like, how can consultants who need new clients, how can they acquire new clients while being stuck at home and not being able to go to network events? And that really speaks to not just people who come to you already, but like how do you get people to you? And I was curious how that kind of falls into the growth marketing space.
Absolutely. I think that's a really great question. And that's something that I get asked at least once a week on as well, that you're a consultant or you're a freelancer and you really rely on face-to-face connections or introductions, and that's not happening at the moment. So it places you in somewhat of a tricky situation, or it may seem like that limits your options, but there are alternative routes you can explore. I myself am looking and constantly evaluating this process or optimizing this process as well. But using new platforms like Clubhouse, I've seen is already very helpful. I did an event last night on Clubhouse. If anybody needs an invite, I still have a couple, so I'm happy to invite you to this platform or explain what this platform was. Had no idea until last week. Experts or just connect with people. That was really helpful, and I got lots of messages this morning in my LinkedIn inbox asking follow-up questions, also asking to have a coffee and connect, and some people are interested in a little bit of freelancer work or consultant work that they would like my opinion on. So personally, I think that's a really great option. There's also different Slack communities that could be open to you trying. There are different conferences that are taking themselves online, and a lot of them are exploring how they can still shape that conference atmosphere of community connections. There are different groups like the Wing, for example, that is really for now when all their locations are closed because people can't go there in person, they're doing events online. So it's really about finding what is your niche area, your area of expertise, or even if you're a bit more of a generalist as well, what do you really want to focus on? What's going to enable you to upskill and continue developing your skills, but improving your personal branding wherever you're seeking and finding those communities online. It's definitely easier than said, but I think it is possible, and it may just take a little bit of trial and error to figure out what's going to work best for you, but don't give up. There will be something out there you can connect with.
I don't have to tell Marieke this because Marieke is certified brand change trainer. But one of the things that I'm always really keen on, so when we work with the brand thinking canvas and when we talk about, okay, so what's, really understanding really well, like what's your purpose? What are you promising to commit? Like, who is your audience? Where can you find them? Where are they already hanging out? And really understanding who your best match audience is. And what I've heard from a lot of the trainers in our network is, for instance, do I jump on the content marketing bandwagon? Do I need to be found through SEO? And I think in some cases that's very helpful. But actually what we see when people start working on the first canvas and the second, where they map out their audiences and how they can reach them, is that there's actually a lot more interesting and novel ways to make better, closer connections with people. Mm-hmm. So specific, if you know really well who you're trying to find, then exactly finding the conferences and finding the communities is much easier. And the analogy that we always use there is like, trying to fish the ocean or trying to fish a pond. So trying to make your pond as small as possible so that you have a better grip on where to find the people, on what your message to them is. We have him on the line. Howard, are you here?
Yes, hi, yeah, I'm here.
Hi, Howard.
Hello, thanks.
Hey, Howard. So you mentioned on the my request for challenges, you mentioned that there is a glass brand in South Africa that has a beautiful product, but it's hard to simplify the story and still communicate the impact in a powerful way so that customers really see kind of the full value of the glass products. And I thought it was a really interesting question because in a way, I would say it's more of a brand and storytelling question than necessarily a growth marketing question. But then I put it in front of Sarah, and she was like, "No, we can work with that." So Sarah has an answer for you, I think.
Absolutely. So definitely, as I said, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, or maybe we can answer further questions later on as well. But when it comes to storytelling and growth marketing go hand in hand, because you had to figure out the best way to tell your story. How are you going to best communicate what makes you so special? What is, out of all the things that your audience sees on a daily basis, why should they dedicate some time to learning more about you? And you can do that through a series of experimentation. So if you are doing storytelling on your website, you can use combinations of videos. Some people will have GIFs running in the background where people can see, and then they're reading the text and they get a feel for the brand and what makes you special. There's all kinds of things that you can test. So I would definitely recommend trying out Usability Hub. You can also try out user testing, visualize all the platforms that I've mentioned to find out which one you like the look of, and give it a try to see how you can keep iterating on your storytelling process. You can also look at your audience. If you already have some people that you are working with that are your customers, maybe you have some customers that are really just very passionate about your brand and what it is that you do. You can also send an email asking them, how would you describe us in 3 words, or how would you describe us and what we do in 1 sentence? Sometimes getting some feedback from your audience makes you feel fantastic, right? And really helps to keep your energy up when you're running a business, which can be exhausting. But you really then can see from their perspective why they're choosing you. And you can kindly ask them if it's all right and then borrow that and change it into your storytelling to put on your website as well. Sometimes our own customers give us the best advice on how to market ourselves. So never be afraid to reach out to your own audiences there if you have them already.
It reminds me of two things, which is Maya, who runs the meetups in Amsterdam. She actually created a meetup event format where the participants pitch the product to the brand owner, which is really, really interesting concept.
Nice.
And very, very helpful. And another example is, I don't know if you guys know Suguru. It's one of the case studies we have in the book. So Suguru is this moldable glue that you can use to fix anything. So I'm not sure if you've ever like broken a clasp off your ski boot or something plastic where it's like, wow, I have this big plastic thing and now it doesn't work anymore. There was a really, really tough uphill battle for them to be able to sell such a kind of novel plastic fixing product to people. And then I think through the community building that they did over the years, one of their customers mentioned in the conversation that Suguru is like Play-Doh and superglue had a baby together. And that became a really, helpful way for them to talk about the product to other customers. So I think having those conversations and getting over your shyness and building a bit of community around the product is very helpful. Having brand ambassadors who keep an eye out for you and pick up these kind of phrases is also really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. We had, let's see, you had another question, Howard, because let me see, do you, for a small established family-run business with no formal marketing team or staff or skills, is it wise to take on growth marketing or should you outsource it?
It's a really good question. And that is definitely one that is a personal choice and assessing. So even though you have no marketing, but that's all right. There's loads of different things that you can pick up on and you can upskill yourself in, but it's a matter of time and what you're willing to give people access to as well. So to break that down a little bit more, if you have the availability, the resources, and also the mindset and the patience, because it does take some time to get into marketing, figuring out what all the different tools are, different strategies, frameworks. If you have that time, we generally recommend that it's better that you upskill yourself where possible to be able to do these things. Because working with agencies or freelancers can be adding an extra hurdle into the process, depending on who you're going with, of course. Just like with any business, there are agencies that will not allow you access to their data, but there are agencies that will be your best friend in this process, give you access to your data, really allowing you to see what experiments that they are running or you're running and seeing your results from that as well. So if you don't have the resources, you can't upskill yourself, take the time, ask for references, do your checking as well, ask them for case studies, and find someone, if you're going to outsource it, who you can really trust and you feel like is going to have as possible for an outsider to have as much love for your brand and your passion and philosophy as possible, and making sure they're going to keep good communication, they have past experiences, all these things. So do your proper checking if you're going to outsource, and they're going to make sure that they're giving you good insight on what is happening with your data and your experimentation process. You can upskill yourself.
I
really
think the Growth Tribe Academy was kind of started because David, one of the founders, realized that this is not something that you can really sell as consultancy, right? That you needed to actually build the skills within the team.
Exactly. Yeah. For the long-term sustainability businesses, it's always great if you have someone in-house, and the consultant model can be very difficult because there's a lot that happens with an organization that consultants, no matter how embedded you are, you may not see or be aware of. Just think about like a new period of getting onboarded to a company. You have to learn, okay, what's the structure here? What is okay culturally for the company? What is not okay? Who do I contact for this information? And when you have a consultant who's trying to do growth marketing, they have to be aware of all the logistical sides of the organization, the data, the marketing, what everyone's priorities are. And it is a massive struggle, and it's rarely executed to a very high standard compared to someone who can be in-house and doing these same things for you. So definitely a trade-off, and you may scale, and you may start off with someone who is outsourced, but then move into an in-house position later on. So it's just about keeping in mind about your business may change, and how you deal with marketing as well may change over time. What's going to work best for you at this time may not be the best thing in 6 months' time or years' time as well. So be open to those changes.
One of the things, or one of the thoughts that your question triggers, Howard, is also I meet a lot of teams where there isn't marketing or brand or communication skill necessarily built in. And I think there's this kind of dysfunctional belief that brand and marketing and communication is kind of overhead, and that it belongs to, you know, something that we'll do if ever we have a lot of budget left. And I'm maybe Bas van de Paard, and Bas has a storied career in also advertising. But we always say, like, well, that's the last thing that you want to cut corners on, because it's basically the engine. Like, it can be the financial engine that causes your revenue to shoot up, but it is a bit, it feels for people like a chicken or egg dilemma. Like, do I invest in it? Will it like pay off? And I think when you build the skills yourself and you're able to see, like, hey, if I push this lever, do I actually see a change? Then you can also grow that confidence in saying, like, oh, okay, well, I invested this much in upskilling in terms of like maybe a training or hours that I spent, but I can immediately see how this is going to make a difference. That then also can give you the confidence to go out and maybe hire someone to do the work, because you'll better understand what you want them to do, and you'll better understand, if I pay them, let's say $2,000 or $5,000 or $20,000, what is the result that I get? And if they don't perform, can I get rid of them as soon as possible without burning through my $20,000 budget? Because I think one of the risks is, if you don't know about something and you have to hire an expert, that person has to be really good in taking you kind of through the process of what you're going to do together.
Yeah, that's one of the number one questions I get asked when I'm asked about freelancers or agencies is, how do I know if they're doing a good job? What should I be checking for? Or how much should I expect this to cost, and what kind of results I should be seeing? So yeah, absolutely, I cannot stress your point enough, making sure that you know enough yourself, or that you're going to find someone who will help educate you and upskill you as well, to make sure that you both then benefit, because then you can have more productive conversations over time as well.
Cool. I see that Sylvia, sorry, Sylvia, I missed a question of yours about A/B testing.
Is that A/B testing? I think this is referring to maybe the different tests that you can do on a landing page. Okay, all right, so really nice technical question here. Okay, first of all, to start off with, A/B testing, for those who don't know, is essentially when you have two different versions of a page and you're testing to see which version is going to be better. So maybe you have one headline, headline A and headline B. You're going to run these two pages for 2 weeks, your experiment time, and see which one is going to give you more conversions, or which one is going to work better for your audience. Now, A/B testing is a very big buzzword when it comes to growth marketing, but it's something that actually, for a lot of smaller companies or even scale-ups, you should not necessarily be working with, because you have to have a certain number of conversions and a certain number of visitors to have a statistically significant A/B test. Now, there's a really good tool, it's called the A/B testing calculator. If you Google it or search it on whatever search engine, it should be one of the first results, but it's a really good one because it allows you to put in how many visitors you have and how many conversions you have to determine if you have a statistically significant A/B test. Now, what you're asking in theory is more of a multivariate test, or it could even just be you being very scrappy getting into experimentation, and you try one headline out for 2 weeks, you note that down in a spreadsheet somewhere, hopefully you've got your documentation organized, and then you change the headline and then run it for another couple of weeks and see what the different change was. And you take into account any potential seasonality factors, or were you mentioned in some great newspaper, these kinds of things. But there's lots of different types of tests that are available out there. You don't necessarily have to work within a test, depending on what your system setup, your resources are as well. So don't let that put you off if you think you have to test an A/B test, a multivariate test, smoke test, dry wallet test, all these kind of very big, buzzy name tests, but definitely worth to explore out there for future possibilities as you continue to scale up as well. Does that answer your question, Sylvia? Okay, great.
Any other questions for Sarah? The A/B testing calculator. Yeah, that was the tool.
Yes. I can try to find the link now and send it to you all. There's a very specific one that's great.
Cool. Well, thanks so much, Sarah, for spending time with us and helping to kind of discover this whole new world of growth marketing. I really appreciate the time you put into this, and yeah, also helping us to kind of explore these new areas of getting ideas for change out there in the world. The result of a campaign like the Right for Rights for Amnesty really shows like that's an amazing difference. Imagine, what was it, from 60,000 to 200,000 letters sent. That's a pretty amazing type of difference. I mean, I can imagine for organizations like Amnesty that makes an incredible difference on impact. And this is really at the core of what we talk about when we talk about, you know, selling brands for change better, is that they're amazing ideas, but if we don't have the skills to actually sell them better, then we're not gonna do justice to the kind of difference that we can make. So thanks for bringing those examples and for opening up your toolbox. For those of you who haven't yet, we'd love to hear from you what you thought of the session and what you want to do next month. So I don't have anything lined up yet. I'm very open to suggestions. We have a couple of cards in our pocket, so I'd love to hear from you. And Wenju, you shared the link, I think. If not, you can share it again. Thanks so much and have a lovely week, and hope to see you again next month on the 3rd Thursday of March, I believe. Cool. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, everyone.
Right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Anne.
No worries. Thanks, everybody. It was great to have you, meet you all. And thanks, Anne.
Cheers.